Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors can tell you all about their books. You can find us here at LTVEH. Just go on the website, ltveh.org, and search for The Writer's Dream, and you can find our episodes. You can also find us on Cablevision Channel 20, Thursdays at 3 p.m. You can find us on Facebook. If you have a question for me, please message me through that Facebook page. The name of the Facebook page is, guess what? The Writer's Dream. So today's guest is Mark Torres, who is the author of Adeline. And I am going to love this interview because he writes mysteries and so do I. So describe your book.
Oh, thanks for having me back, Linda. Great to be on the show. So Adeline, it was released on July 1st. It is about the murder of a young woman wrongly committed into a notorious mental asylum in Rockland County, New York in 1977. Savoy Graves, our protagonist from the first book, A Stirring in the North Fork, returns to investigate this crime, and he finds himself plunged into the dark underworld of a secret society hell-bent on guarding their identity at all costs.
Secret society. Of course, I want to ask you what the secret society is, and I'll give the book away, so you can't do that. I'm going to ask you to do something that I think is really very helpful for authors. I'm going to ask you to give me an elevator pitch. And for our viewers who don't know what an elevator pitch is, if they've been watching this show, they should know what it is. But an elevator pitch is if you find yourself on an elevator going from like the 1st to the 15th floor, and you realize that you're there with an editor or a president or somebody who is deeply involved in getting your book published, what would you say to them about your book? In however long it takes from the 1st to the 15th floor.
Assuming how many stops. I would simply say that the book, if you like gripping crime novels, fast-paced crime novels, this book's for you. If you like books that are sentimental and frightening, that tug at your heartstrings, that make you scream for justice, this book is for you. And if you also like books that teach the readers things of history from the past, issues of mental illness, issues of mental asylums and the status of that in New York State, and also the determination of a protagonist not willing to give up and really turn at every stone to try to bring justice to the case, this book would be for you.
Okay, so I'm going to take this book and I'm going to read it because it sounds very exciting. So I have a review that I'd like to read. Okay, so it says, sentimental and frightening and everything else in between. Mark Torres has done it again with his latest novel, Adeline. Following his debut novel, A Stirring in the North Fork, and you were on the show for that.
That's correct.
Okay. Adeline's storyline happily reconnects me with some of the most unforgettable and compelling characters. I was instantly hooked from the first page. I smiled, I cried, and at the end, slept with the light on. No spoilers here. You'll have to get your own copy of Adeline to realize the full experience. I'm already anxiously awaiting what Mark has in store for us next. Congratulations to Mark on another outstanding and truly captivating storyline. Don't you love when they write a review that they want you to write another book?
I do.
Immediately, you just got this one out. Yeah. You put all this work into it. Oh, what's next? So every writer takes a journey. Every author takes a journey when they're writing a book. What's unique about yours?
Well, apart from the first book took 4 months to write. Really short process. I was eager, go-getter, my first novel. This book took almost double that, almost 2 years. And the reason why, it was a lot more research involved. And I'm not, because I'm a lawyer by trade, I'm not the type of author to just want to put something in writing and expect the reader to accept it at face value. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to convince myself, and I set a very hard bar. So I do a lot of research. I visited former mental asylums throughout New York State. I've spoken at length with medical examiners, one of them, Dr. Peter Speth, who helped solve the Golden State Killer case many years back. So I've done a lot of research as well as talking with law enforcement people to get to the proper understanding and to be able to reduce it to writing so that my high bar can be met and hopefully the readers as well.
Yeah, well, that's, I think research really does lend authenticity to a book. If I read a book and the writer, I'm sorry, never gets past describing the rooms that the people are in, I find the book boring. Yeah. I want something more out of the book. So,
and just on that, my wife always says, show, don't tell. And it really helped me be a better writer to explain to the reader, where are you? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What is the aura?
The five
of the
senses.
Place? 5 senses.
Right, absolutely. And sometimes even just when you give something that you just take for granted, like the smell of something. That's and whatnot, right. It makes all the difference in the world. What do you like best about your book? I'm going to ask it differently. What did you like best about both your books?
Well, I love developing a story around a character. Savoy Graves, a lovable character, an out-of-work attorney turned detective, who really used his acumen, his skills to investigate these cold case crimes where no one else would. They were forgotten stories, buried. It was able to develop this noirish genre that has been described to me, and I appreciate that. And you kind of appreciate this character. You take a journey with him. What I like about the second book in particular is the added elements of terror, of fear, of this sinister group that is and acts above the law, can do what they want, when they want, have law enforcement, judicial people, politicians, everyone on the payroll. Someone that to that extent will do everything they can to keep their own identity a secret. And while this lovable detective, quasi-sleuth detective is investigating this case, he's running into this sinister dark world. And he finds himself in very dangerous situations.
So the first book took place on Long Island, or takes place on Long Island, and the second one, Westchester County?
Yes. Well, the family of Adeline, the young woman, had lived in Westchester County, and the mental facility, Thornwood Manor, is located in Rockland County, right across the Hudson River and the Tappan Zee Bridge. Again, it was visually set in places I've seen and known, I've been to. The protagonist, Savoy, and now his wife, Lola, who met in the first book, are married and living on Long Island as well. So that whole local community feel is important for me as a writer to express that to readers as well.
Do you think if you weren't a Long Islander, okay, this is hard to put into words. If you weren't a Long Islander and you picked up the book, would you find Long Island an interesting place? Did you make it an interesting place?
Absolutely. The first book is Stirring in the North Fork, if I may. When this came out, we've been vacationing on the North Fork for 20 years. And it's the kind of place you go to get inspired to read a book. I get inspired to write one. Very visually setting, but it's not exclusive. It could be someone from Maine, someone from all parts of the country that can appreciate small town Americana, if you will. Similarly with Adeline, it was set in a different location, but the visual sentiments are still there. The looming, beautiful, majestic Hudson River, the beautiful facilities that are set, even though they were mental asylums, they were set in a different mindset than the traditional hospitals like you would see, say, at Kings Park or Creedmoor. These are more two-story, Thomas Jeffersonian-style homes, stone homes, built on thousands of acres, a beautiful, sprawling area. So again, the visual aspect, for me as a writer, was very important.
Yeah, I find that what I try to do in my books is make the setting like a character.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the setting is always kind of leaning over your shoulder.
Yeah.
And
not always pretty. Could be looming, could be, certainly.
Yeah, it can be scary.
Yes.
I mean,
and that visual aspect lends to the cover. And if you've seen the cardinal here, my daughter, Olivia Torres, she's 11, and she had designed this cover at my request. And I'm trying to promote and get her involved in the whole process. And we're real pleased with her work and proud of her for that.
Can you tell us the significance of the cardinal, or do you have to read the book?
It would have to read the book, but most certainly you will understand it when you read it. It has significant meaning throughout the book as well.
Okay. Is that cardinal alive or dead? Oh, never mind.
It does draw a lot of mystery, don't it?
Okay, so what was the most fun writing this book?
Well, I think the most fun was emerging through the muck of the challenge. There were times I had plenty of doubts where I couldn't get past certain points. And what I needed as a writer, and again, this goes to my high bar, is that validity to make the story believable in a truest sense and to continue to flow. And there was a point where I was stuck. And then what I did then, instead of kind of just, kind of scream at the typewriter, I just moved away and I focused on my research. And that really helped me get back to lending the creative inspiration to continue and ultimately finish the book.
That's a piece of advice I've given in a blog. When you have writer's block, go to your research.
Yeah.
No matter if you're writing a romance that takes place in a small town, research a small town, because every place has its mysteries and its stories, and once you do that, it sometimes gives you like a hook into another aspect of the story, or it settles something in your mind.
And within this book, there are some complicated medical jargon that's discussed regarding the autopsy of the victim. So it took a lot of learning as well as a lot of storytelling.
So from my own professional curiosity, how did you get to talk to a medical examiner? What was that process?
I was part of a blog or a group of fiction writers, and some of them had medical examiners, and they were all over the country, in California and whatnot. And someone had suggested Dr. Peter Speth, the local, I say local, he lives in New Jersey near Philadelphia, and just picked up the phone and called. I found him online, and he was gracious enough to talk with me, and we had several discussions after, and we went back and forth, and I really learned a tremendous amount. And strangely enough, I have already designed a character about him before even meeting him. It was almost like his storytelling led to what I was going in the first place, but it gave that all-important validity that I needed to finish the story. So it was very important to get that, as well as law enforcement, and also visiting the sites. We visited, like I said, we visited Creedmoor, we visited Kings Park, we visited Letchworth Village, and all these different places where they were the bygone era of mental asylums that broke really through the early 90s. It was important to get that research aspect honed down.
Yes, yeah, that's a challenging area to write about. So as an author, why did you pick mystery?
Well, I picked, I'm a lawyer, again, by trade. Writing in general, writing fiction was an outlet away from the legal structures of writing as an attorney. Mystery always fascinated me. I love the cold case genres. I love the old unsolved cases where there's a victim and a story that screams for justice. And that always appeals to me as a reader. I wanted to relay that back as a writer. That was really the driving force by that.
Yeah, there was a TV show called Cold Case.
Yes.
That was really, in fact, my last book was a sort of cold case. But yeah, they are interesting. So talk about your characters. Savoy Graves. Yeah. Okay, where'd that name come from?
Well, again, the first name derived from my old pet, my beloved golden retriever, Savoy. Anyone who knows me knew he was a wonderful companion. And Graves, I wanted to get a name that has a hook, a spell, a meaning behind it. But he's a humble guy. He's, in many ways, somewhat autobiographical. In the first book, we talk about how he was let go from a dream job at a large law firm and how he was in total despair. And then he stumbled on this case and said, well, let's just give it a shot. And that case took him to eventually meeting what will be his wife, Lola. And she's very much part of it. In fact, she's partners with him in this book, much like modeled after my wife, Dalia Ortiz Torres. And they're kind of a tag team on this case. And that was another nuance different from the first book, them working together, trying to explore the case. Really.
Yeah, well, that's always, because I think as a female reader, it's nice to have, a female character. Adeline. Tell me about Adeline. Yeah. Tell us what you can about Adeline.
Adeline, she was at 17. She had a rare genetic disorder, which in the book is a fictionalized name. And the reason why I did that, because I didn't want to limit it to one type of disorder, whether it's autism or Williams syndrome.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
I wanted to keep it open in general, and I wanted the reader to and whether they could relate to it or not, just to keep it in that open way. And she was maturing into a young woman, and the parents were terrified that she could not be controlled or that she would be manipulated by men and abused. And they felt, albeit wrongly, that the best course of action was to have her committed to this facility for her safety. unfortunately enough, that was where her demise was met, in that facility less than 2 years later. And she, she's a special character and you'll see a lot of touches of her in the book in different aspects, from sorrow to being committed to joyous dance with someone she's befriended at the facility, and ultimately, unfortunately, to her untimely death.
So then you go back and forth in time?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Again,
That's
I like
another
that.
element I like.
Yeah, I love that they kind of bring you to the present. And the trick there, it's difficult to you want to make sure the reader can easily follow, whether it's a detail of a brand new car in 1972, then the reader can understand the year, or a song, or something that will trigger an identifying clue of what time period.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You could do a lot with music.
Yeah, absolutely.
Music and headlines, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not too hard to find. Any other interesting characters? You have Adeline, you have the detective, his wife, the medical examiner.
Andre Dre Carter. He's a prosecutor, federal prosecutor. He returns in this case, and he's the one who really gives Savoy that ability to, if there's anything to be had with the evidence that they may find, to use it or not. Again, Savoy doesn't have prosecutorial power. He doesn't have authority of any kind of law enforcement. He's just an average Joe investigating. When he gets this evidence, he brings it to Andre Carter and his team to use it or not. And that's the hurdle he always has to face. He needs credible evidence, otherwise they can't really move on it. The neighbor, Stanley, he's a prominent character in the book. There's so many characters, from Doug Reynolds to different characters of all different, not only of stature and what they do, but also time periods and when they were around.
That's right, yeah, because things change.
Yes.
So what was the most challenging to do when you were writing? Was it the characters, the plot, or the setting? Because those are three elements.
I would say in this case the plot. My goal was to try to, as a writer, and you know this, Linda, we're always trying to write better. We want to make better stories. And the really key for me and the challenge was to make it a better story. The writing is far more better. The editing is far more superior. The product itself is more. But ultimately it comes down to the story. And I wanted to really make a good story that will kind of give you those goosebumps and say this is good, and it kind of stays with you. And that was my challenge.
And also, if you write a good story, just like your review said, your readers look for the next good story because they love a good story. Readers really are voracious about good stories.
Absolutely, and they think they're drawn to characters and connections through it. You'll see in the book From the Files of Savoy Graves. I'd hope to continue along that line because he's a good character and within these good stories. Yeah,
and the thing is that people love series. They love a series that has the same character. There's Daniel Silva with Gabriel Olan, and there's all the different authors who have these main characters. And the trap you fall into is that the plots become very formulaic. Yeah. And what you have to do is you have to really change the setting, and even changing you can change the setting, makes it interesting, but you have to change the story. The stories have to be different. You have to be coming at it from a different aspect. Otherwise, your readers eventually figure out that, oh, this is more of the same.
No, I agree. And that's why I really loved this book, Adeline. That added element of the terror with the secret society was such a crucial, in and of itself, a character. People ask, well, how can you describe him? I think of a cross between the John Wick movies and that sophisticated group they have, and from the movie Eyes Wide Shut, the debauchery they included. And when you put a group in that vein, seemingly untouchable, it makes it very sinister, and that's really what I was aiming for.
Yeah, and readers love that. They really love that. Okay, so did you take any writing courses? Because you're a lawyer. Yes.
I didn't. I've been told I should. I respect the process that authors undergo, and I think everyone has their own journeys. I was a history undergrad at NYU in history. I went to law school, Fordham Law. I'm a lawyer by trade for over 10 years now, and I love legal writing. I love what I do. I guess I consider my writing as more of a hobby, but a professional hobby, something I would not take lightly and do not take lightly. So my writing comes just from continuous writing and practice and editing and enhancing and developing stories. So I guess I would consider myself that storyteller who writes. and try to put it in that vein, and always look to enhance my skills just by practice.
Yeah, that's funny because that's how I see myself as a storyteller more than a writer. But I did take some courses to write the books. But what I find most helpful is reading lots of different authors to see what their styles are.
Absolutely,
And
I'm learning that
and
as
that's
well.
how you improve, I think.
I agree. I'm reading a lot of Colson Whitehead, and you appreciate the styles. And I never noticed that before. I guess before I became an author, I would just read to look for the storylines. Now you look for styles and you look for subtleties and see how they do.
Does your book have a lot of dialogue?
It does.
Good.
It does. That's one of the strongest aspects of my writing.
Well, that's
I've been
show,
told.
not tell.
Yeah, a lot of dialogue, and it has a lot of interesting quirks in the characters, even the villains, where somehow the readers are left feeling conflicted, where you could almost, and I say this carefully, almost sympathize in certain cases with some of the characters who may not deserve
good.
sympathy.
Because nobody's all bad, right?
Yeah.
Well, there are some people who are all bad. So how did you publish?
I self-published, but I actually published through the Indie Owl Press. Vanessa Anderson is a wonderful, based in Orlando. She's a wonderful editor, reviewer, publisher, and she really helped me guide me through this process from helping to form the cover, to the editing, to the marketing, and it's been a great joy. It's an improved step. She prides herself, and they pride themselves on helping independent authors maintain their voice. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want to feel as if I'm giving it away to someone else to find that for me, or hone it in a way where it gets lost. So my voice is prevalent throughout, and it's strengthened by her and their assistance. So Indie Owl Press is a great journey, and I hope to work with them in the future. Yeah,
well, I think that sometimes I do career days with kids about writing, and I tell them they need to get a day job. And preferably, if they're really serious about writing, get it in the industry so that they learn all the aspects of the industry. But there are so few publishers now, and I think people, if you want to be a writer as your main profession and you start out very young, that's one thing. But people like us who do this as, I won't call it a hobby, it's like an avocation. It's
a calling.
We've already had a career, and now we're branching out into something new. Then I like self-publishing because I have control.
Yes.
I have control over all aspects of it, and if you talk to people who find a publisher, they still have to market. So in the last few minutes of the show, I want you to go into the wonderful adventures of marketing your book.
Well, and I always say, just on your comments there, it never feels like work when you're having fun. And for me, that's been the case. And I think if I was, assigned, if you will, to a publisher, I may be lost in that. Marketing, I'm entirely through social media. In my first book, Starring in the North Fork, within 1 year of its release, it was pictured on all 7 continents of the world by readers, which I thought was a great way to get your work promoted. I plan to do the same here. I'm available on Twitter, on Torres Author 1, as well as LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm always promoting the work. And I'm also, you do it in a fun way. You meet people, you share the book, you take pictures, you discuss careers. I'm not one to say, hey, buy my book. I'm one to say, let's have fun. If you enjoy it, please share it with the world. And that's what I continuously strive for.
So you've done a bunch of bookstores, though, yes?
Yes, I've done a bunch of, for this book, for the first book, many bookstores, many libraries, which are a great group of readers and avid people to meet. For this one, we have several events coming. After this interview, I have at the Burton's Bookstore in Greenport this Saturday.
That's a nice bookstore.
It is wonderful. Love Burton's, and I have a lot of other local events as well as libraries set up going into the fall. So late summer is always a tough period. People are vacationing, so I'm open to speak to whoever would like to hear about my journey and this book. And I'm always been that way, and that always keeps it fun.
You know what I found in my own with my own books is that the libraries weren't so much interested in me as an author just to talk about my books, but they were interested in me as an author and somebody who could do lectures on topics related to the books. Yeah. So I developed a lecture series on topics in forensic science.
Wonderful.
And it's really caught on. It's very popular. But I get to talk about my books as well. And so you have to kind of find these little gimmicks of how to get out there.
Yeah, I agree. I talk a lot of times because of my career as an author. I've also, aside from these 2 books, I've written a children's book titled Good Guy Jake, and that teaches about what unions do, to youth. So I try to incorporate my career along with my books as well. look for a
good.
niche.
That's good. So, what advice would you give to new writers?
I would, whether new or old, I would say write. I've found, particularly with this one, that you become a slave to the story, that it's going to come out of you whether you resist it or not. If you're committed and work hard, don't be afraid to write and keep writing and perfecting, and most of all, enjoy it. Don't see it, I think, if you see it as a true profession where it's work and inundating, you may get turned off. See it more as a hobby or a calling. It's something where you can have fun and enjoy doing and producing work of art.
I think that comes out in your books. I think if you enjoy it, the book is better. What's next? Do you have an idea for another story?
I have some ideas for historical nonfiction. Again, my history major in me as well. But of course, I look to extend the line, the Savoy Grace Files as well, and look for other ideas. But again, it's going to be maintained with that high bar. It's got to be a story that will give me chills before I ask you to read it, and hopefully give you chills as well. And I'll just continue researching and going along the way.
So what area of history, this nonfiction book?
It would be historical. It would be probably set. We're looking at some historical settings in on Long Island, Shelter Island for one, and other areas. It could go back to from the periods of slavery, American slavery. It could go back even beyond where the double axe murder on Long Island in Cutchogue many years ago.
Yay!
I know, but it's interesting with that kind of story. That ties loosely to my work because it's one of the first workplace violence issues you could think of. And again, I represent working people for a living, and workplace violence unfortunately is prevalent. And it's important to get these stories out, have some kind of teaching message. Well,
nonfiction sells better than fiction.
And for me, I want to just put out stories that will stand the test of time. And if it sells, great. If it don't, as long as people read it and enjoy it, that's my goal.
Sounds like you're on your way.
Thank
It was
you.
great to have you, Mark.
Likewise.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
And we'll look forward to that next book.
That'd be great.
There's a lot about slavery on